it's time. I have a definitive tier list to tell you all about. On this show, we don't do tier lists, right? We all know about that. However, it's finally time for me to show you all my definitive tier list. I played Plus R again for the first time in like, I don't know, months yesterday. You guys are all looking at tier lists from all these Guilty Gear legends of old, and it's time for the modern era to arise and for me to show you the real modern tier list for Plus R, okay? As you can see here, these good-for-nothing, dirty grapplers made it into the top again. And Faust, you know how I feel about that character. Despicable. Mid-tier Testament. Right next to Soul Bad Guy. That looks right. And Abba and Zappa and Chim. This tier list, was posted in the subreddit. And the title of this post is, My 6th grade students made a Plus R tier list after our 4th full class tournament. He says, well, for context, every month, if we're far enough ahead of where I plan to be for that month, we get a free day that includes a fun little tournament of Plus R. I bring in 2 sticks, 2 pads, and my computer and hook it up on the projector on the ceiling, and we play it on the screen. The winner of this tournament has to face me as the final boss. That's like a fighting game story ending mode. The meta is janky because most of the kids don't know how to do motions. Charge moves seem to be easier for them to figure out. Potemkin isn't a grappler in this meta. He's a mid-range brawler who just uses 6H and Hammerfall to slap you until you die. One kid kind of knows how to do a Gatling and has a decent idea of how spacing works, and they play May, so all the kids assume she's top tier. I main Faust and actually have an okay enough idea how to play the game, so they think he's the most broken thing ever. Pokes are busted, so if your pokes are good enough, you're a strong character. One kid actually got his parents to buy him the game, and he's determined to learn how to play Zappa, of course. Oddly enough, nobody played Johnny in the last one, so I think they put him in B tier for no reason other than his design is cool. They were like, he's cool looking. You know when people say things like, you know, the tier list doesn't really matter for you when you're new at the game, right? Like people say this a lot. They're like, when you're new, it's an entirely different experience than when you played the game for a long time. This is a very like severe version of what people are talking about when they say that. There's a reason why, like especially when new games come out or people are new to game, they think that grapplers are broken. They're like, grab this guy, his command grab does 1,000,000 damage, I hate it here. Like, what am I gonna do? Why would Milia be good in their tier list? No health, doesn't have good pokes, same with Eno and Baiken, doesn't have big moves you can slap Potemkin with from across the screen, right? It's a real thing. I'm aware there's another post. What do you think this tab is right here? The new post is the 6th grade meta update. War has changed. The 6th grade tournament for December was today. The first couple rounds went about the same as usual. 6H pop fights and a fun Robokai mirror. Then it happened. Zappa Kid was set to play against May, the same May that had won the last tournament. Round 1 starts and boo, ghost. Projectiles have entered the meta game. It wasn't even close. None of the kids have an understanding of how to fight against projectiles. The couple times anyone got close, Zappa Kid just did a basic Gatling and ran away to throw more ghosts. I love that it's ghosts and not the better summon. It's not sword, it's not dog, it's literally ghost. Like that, they're like, this is the one everybody has to be afraid of. It was great. At the end of the tournament, he came to me with confidence because, you know, he's got to fight the final boss. He still lost. It turns out that having played Guilty Gear for over a decade is enough to overcome basic projectile throwing. But it's nice to have a new layer to the meta. Zappa is broken now, and kids are rethinking Pot's place. They're like, wait a minute, are these grapplers not as cheap as we thought? 3 other kids told me that they were asking their parents for Plus R for Christmas. I've never had a class get quite this into it. I expect this meta to get really interesting in the near future. Here's a question. Should I tell Zappa Kid about Dust Loop? I love this moral quandary of like, do I inform Zappa Kid about this resource? Because this Zappa Kid is trying to, learn. The teacher says, part of me wants to share this resource with him, but another part of me finds this weird, naturally occurring metagame more interesting. Plus, I worry that he'll get so caught up in trying to sit in training mode and do combos that he'll burn himself out on it. Wikis can be detrimental to your enjoyment if you try to hold yourself to an optimized standard when you're still new to the genre, especially when you're diving into a game with as difficult combos as Plus R. My opinion about this is that you either tell everybody about it or none of them. This kid, if they're interested, they'll go find it anyway, or you just wait. You know what I mean? Like, you just let them do their thing, or make one of your lessons a Plus R lesson, you know? When one person starts to learn, then the rest are going to start to learn. Anyway, I love this because, you know, as people say, my experience and opinions and feelings about the game at one level is going to be completely different from everybody else's experiences and opinions about the game at another level. There's a reason that to people who have never played fighting games before, they pick up the characters that have like big slappy full screen normals and a lot of health, and they're great, right? They just hit you with big attacks and you die. It's like really interesting, and I think for a lot of people who have this like opinion that tier lists are just, you know, whatever the best player in the world thinks is the best character is like, if you pick that character, you'll win everything ever, is just, you know, not accurate. This is why tier lists don't really matter that much for a lot of levels of play. If you took like people who have never played Street Fighter and you gave them Zangief and told them to like spam Lariat, just like, hey, hit these buttons over and over and do Lariat, that person will probably win way more than somebody who picked Rashid or like the, you know, whoever's the best character in the game at the time. That kind of idea holds true. And I think at a lot of levels of play, you notice that the difference in character efficiency is just dramatic to the point where you're like, wait, this character is just the best. I think people don't believe you. I gotta be honest. I feel like most of the time when I tell people, hey man, the tier list doesn't matter, you know, especially at like most levels of play, the tier list doesn't matter. You should pick the character you think is tight and just go play the video game. This 6th grade metagame is a great example of like, depending on the level of play, the skill and difficulty of the character and like how, the ease of use and how hard it is to stop stuff is way more important than like who is the strongest character in the game. If that Zappa kid figures out how to use sword, they're gonna burn +R to the ground. They're gonna be like, fuck. And then some kid's gonna show up playing Testament and it's over. Fujin would be a beast, actually. Fujin would be a dominant force, but as mentioned in the post, most of them don't know how to use motions. Did they tell them they had to stop playing and learn all the motions first? Yeah. There's like a perception that you have to learn everything on the planet before you go play the video game. But like, you know, we'll figure that out later. Whatever that fucking super does, I'll figure it out at some other time. I don't care. I have been following this with great joy. Like, this is really funny to read, you know. It's very fascinating. It's a good reminder of like, you know, what the fuck fighting games are like. I also was reading an R Games thing. There's like a weekly post that's like, what are you playing and do you like it? I usually scan it to see if there's any games on there that I'm like, what the fuck is this? And I go look them up. And someone said they were like playing Guilty Gear on there, and they're like, yeah, I'm still playing Guilty Gear, and like, I don't really know what's happening. I'm running around in floor 8 to 10, and I'm just doing Potemkin stuff, like trying to land command throws, and it's pretty fun. And I was like, you know, there's a lot of people like that. They're just like, Guilty Gear is just some game that they play every once in a while amongst all their other games, and they just want to land the big move, go burr, and that's all they care about, which is like, that's perfectly fine. Not all of us are it's not our lives, you know. Some people, it's just like a game they play on the side for fun. This tier list needs to be put on the Dustloop tier list page. It would be cool if Dustloop was like, hey, the main thing about tier lists is that at any level of play, like, they don't matter. Like, this is a tier list of people who don't know how to play the game. And as you can see, it's very different than super experienced players. So if you're new, don't worry about the tier list. That actually wouldn't be a bad idea. But it might not have a place there, to be honest for you. Listen. I'm sure these kids are like, what the what is this game? Like, what? It's probably such a strange, archaic game to them compared to everything that they actually play. Why doesn't it have Marvel characters? How do I build a fortress? How do I build a skyscraper? You know, they're out there cranking 90s and fucking building skyscrapers, and they're like, wait, motion input? You know what's funny? Have you ever seen what people's hands look like when they build in Fortnite? I see that shit, and I'm like, bro, that shit is next level.